The municipal meeting was in full swing. The hall was packed to capacity, and, unusually, not a single member was absent. The issue under discussion was whether the women in the marketplace should be expelled from the city, as their existence was deemed a stain on humanity, decency, and civilization. One of the more prominent members of the council, a man regarded as a true patriot and a compassionate servant of the nation, was delivering an impassioned speech with outstanding eloquence. And gentlemen, consider this. These women reside in a part of the city that is not only a central thoroughfare, but also the city's largest commercial hub. Every respectable man, whether he likes it or not, is forced to pass through that market. Furthermore, the market's commercial significance compels even the chaste and dignified daughters-in-law and young women of honorable families to shop there. Now, gentlemen, when these virtuous ladies witness the extravagant adornments of these shameless, half-dressed courtesans, it is only natural that new desires and aspirations for beauty and charm awaken in their hearts. They then began to demand all sorts of powders, lotions, shimmering saris, and expensive jewelry from their poor husbands. The result? Their once happy homes, their sanctuaries of peace, turn into a living hell. And gentlemen, think of our nation's young sons, those studying in schools, the very future upon whom the hopes of our country rest. We anticipate that these young individuals will eventually guide our nation through challenging times. Yet they too must pass through this market every morning and evening. These courtesans, always adorned in full finery, shamelessly cast their seductive glances and rain arrows of temptation upon passers-by, inviting them towards sin. Tell me, gentlemen, can our innocent, inexperienced youth, lost in the intoxication of their young age, unaware of the perils of right and wrong, truly shield their thoughts, emotions, and noble character from the corrupting effects of such an environment? Do you not see, gentlemen, how the deceitful allure of these women leads our young sons astray? How does it plants within their hearts a thirst for the forbidden, stirring restlessness, turmoil, and an uncontrollable frenzy? At this point, a council member, who had once been a school teacher and had a particular fondness for statistics, spoke up. Gentlemen, let it be noted that the failure rate among students has increased by 1.5 times compared to the past 5 years. Another member, an elderly man wearing glasses, who also served as the honorary editor of a weekly newspaper, began his speech. Gentlemen, morality, honor, manliness, righteousness, and piety are disappearing from our city with each passing day. In their place, shamelessness, cowardice, crime, theft, and fraud are becoming rampant. The use of narcotics is on the rise. Cases of murder, suicide, and financial ruin are increasing. And what is the root cause of all this? It is none other than the filthy presence of these women of the marketplace. Our innocent citizens, ensnared by the locks of their beguiling hair, lose all sense of reason. In order to gain entry to their courtyards, they turn to any methods, whether legal or illegal, to earn money. In their desperation, they sometimes abandon all sense of humanity and commit unspeakable acts. The result? They either lose their lives or rot away in prison. Then an elderly retired council member, the patriarch of a large family, stood up to speak. He had seen the highs and lows of life and was now weary of its struggles, wishing only to spend his remaining years in peace, watching his family thrive under his care. His voice trembled, his tone carrying the weight of a plea. Gentlemen, night after night, the relentless beat of their drums, their indecent singing, the brawls of their lovers, the shouting, the cursing, the laughter, ha 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 ha, ho ho ho, have made life unbearable for the respectable residents of the neighborhood. Sleep at night is impossible, and peace during the day is non-existent. And then there is the moral impact their presence has on our daughters and daughters-in-law. Any father can imagine the consequences. As he spoke his last sentence, his voice choked with emotion, and he could say no more. The entire council felt sympathy for him, as his misfortune was well known. His house stood in the very heart of the red light district. After him, another member took the floor, a man who prided himself on preserving ancient traditions and valued historical relics more than his own children. He spoke with deep concern. Gentlemen, when tourists and visitors come to see our famous historic city, they inevitably pass through this marketplace. And when they inquire about it, believe me, it is nothing short of humiliating. Now the president of the council stood up to speak. Though short in stature, with small hands and feet, his large head gave him an air of wisdom. His tone was measured and dignified as he began. Gentlemen, I completely agree with you that the existence of this class is a source of great shame for our city and our culture. However, the real challenge is how to solve this issue. If we force them to abandon their disgraceful profession, the question arises, how will they survive? A voice from the back interrupted. Why don't these women just get married? At this, a wave of laughter swept through the hall, momentarily breaking the somber atmosphere of the meeting. Once the room had settled, the president continued, Gentlemen, this proposal has been presented to them many times before. Their response remains the same. Respectable and well-off families, fearing for their honor and dignity, would never accept them into their homes. And as for the poor and lower-class men who might be willing to marry them for their wealth, these women themselves refuse to accept such suitors. At this, another member spoke up. The council doesn't need to concern itself with their private affairs. The real issue before us is that these women, whether they go to hell or elsewhere, must leave this city. The president sighed. Gentlemen, that too is no easy task. We are not talking about a handful of people. Their numbers run into the hundreds. And let's not forget, many of these women own their own homes. For about a month, the issue was under discussion in the municipal council. Eventually, all members unanimously agreed that the Courtesan's properties should be bought, and they should be relocated to a remote area far from the city. The women strongly protested, with some defying the order, facing heavy fines and imprisonment. However, they were powerless against the municipality's will and had no choice but to submit. Lists and maps of their properties were prepared, and most would be sold through public auctions. The women were given 6 months to arrange new homes in the designated area. This area was about 12 miles from the city. 11 miles of the road was paved, but the final mile was a dirt path leading to a ruined settlement, once inhabited but now desolate, with snakes, bats, and owls. Surrounding it were small villages, none closer than 2 or 3 miles. The area was silent, with occasional jackals roaming even in daylight. Out of about 500 courtesans, only 14 were forced to relocate. Some stayed due to attachment to their lovers, while others preferred remaining close to the city. These women, however, were wealthy, having sold their properties at a good price. The land in the new area was cheap, and their patrons offered financial support. They decided to build grand houses on a high plot, separate from the nearby crumbling graves. Construction began immediately, with materials arriving all day long, creating a busy atmosphere. Bricks, mortar, beams, and other supplies were brought in carts and wagons and carried by laborers. The accountant recorded every detail, while the construction supervisor directed the masons and laborers. The whole place buzzed with activity. In the midst of the ruins, an old mosque and a dry well were discovered. The workers, seeing the convenience of the well and the opportunity to earn spiritual merit, decided to restore the mosque first. It was completed within 3 days. During lunch breaks, 200 to 300 workers, masons, the accountant, and attendants gathered around the mosque, creating a small fair-like scene. Soon vendors appeared. An elderly woman arrived with a small stall selling cigarettes, beedies, roasted chickpeas, and jaggery sweets. 2 days later, a farmer set up a small stall offering sugar syrup for 2 paise a glass. Hearing about the growing activity, a melon seller arrived with a basket of sweet melons, and another man brought a pot of cooked trotters, setting up a food stall. By the afternoon, workers would gather around the mosque for prayers, with a local cleric arriving the next morning to serve as the mosque's imam. As the marketplace grew, a kebab seller started grilling skewers near the elderly woman's stall, and an innkeeper set up a straw hut with a tandoor, selling fresh bread. Occasionally, a young barber passed through with his worn kit, contributing to the lively atmosphere. The courtesans' houses were supervised by their relatives or attendants, but some days they visited the construction sites themselves, accompanied by their lovers. They stayed until sunset, watching their homes take shape. Beggars, both men and women, often appeared, causing a commotion until they received alms, disturbing the peace. Sometimes idlers and troublemakers from the city walked to the settlement, to see what was happening. If the courtesans were present, it became a festival for them, jeering, making jokes, and acting foolishly. On those days, the kebab seller did great business. The courtesans initially feared living in a desolate place, but over time their apprehension faded. They visited regularly, instructing architects on their preferences for colors and decorations. A dilapidated shrine, likely dedicated to a revered saint, was nearing completion. A wild fakir with bloodshot eyes cleaned it and narrated tales of miracles attributed to Pir Kadak Shah. Within 6 months, all 14 houses were completed, nearly identical with 2 stories, spacious verandas, and marble columns. On auspicious Wednesday, the courtesans arranged an extravagant feast to celebrate the move. The grounds were cleaned and large canopies were set up. The smell of meat and ghee attracted beggars and stray dogs from miles away. By midday, an enormous crowd gathered near Pir Kadak Shah's shrine for the communal meal. The shrine was cleaned and decorated, and a floral sheet was placed over the saint's grave. The fakir was given new clothes, which he promptly tore apart. In the evening, a festive atmosphere filled the air with music and entertainment, as courtesans from far and wide were invited to a gathering. The space was filled with gas lamps, musicians dressed in gold-embroidered sherwanis, and courtesans dressed in delicate saris. The night was filled with dance and revelry, transforming the wilderness into a scene of joy. After the grand celebration, the courtesans began furnishing their homes with chandeliers, crystalware, mirrors, and paintings. Within 8 days, the houses were fully equipped and decorated. They spent their days learning music, dance, and other arts, and by late afternoon, they would head to the bathhouses for grooming. A few days after their arrival, shopkeepers began renting stores at nominal rates. The first was an old woman who started a stall near the mosque, selling modest items like cigarettes, biddies, and matchboxes. Other shopkeepers, including a grocer, confectioner, butcher, kebab seller, and vegetable vendor, set up shops in the area. A few days later, a courtesan's father and brother, both tailors, opened a shop, followed by a barber and a dyer. A peddler who had struggled in the city relocated his business to the area and thrived, selling scented powders, soaps, and other goods. Thanks to the courtesan's patronage, more shopkeepers, including drapers, bakers, and shoemakers, settled in the area. An elderly apothecary moved with his apprentices, setting up a neatly organized shop, displaying medical books, remedies, preserves, and syrups. The moonlight bathed the area beneath a grand canopy, and a lively gathering of music and celebration began. Courtesans from near and far, friends and fellow community members were invited to join in the celebration. They were dressed in brocade and silk sherwanis, and their bodies were adorned with perfume and rouge. The night turned the gathering into a paradise, as the courtesans spent their days learning music, dancing, memorizing ghazals, practicing melodies, and doing crafts like embroidery and sewing. After the celebration, the courtesans decorated their homes and collected supplies, and within 8 days the houses were fully furnished. They spent their days learning music, dancing, memorizing ghazals, practicing melodies, and doing crafts like embroidery and sewing. They also played cards and carom with their instructors, enjoyed light-hearted conversations, or napped. As night fell, gas lamps illuminated the homes, hidden in lotus-shaped marble fixtures. The stained glass windows reflected a beautiful rainbow of colors, and the courtesans strolled along the verandas, chatting and laughing. When tired, they rested indoors, reclining against cushions. Musicians tuned their instruments while chewing betel leaves. As the night grew late, visitors arrived, carrying baskets filled with wine and exotic fruits. Shopkeepers arrived, renting spaces at low rates to encourage business in the area. An old woman set up a shop with cigarette boxes and cut out pictures of actors and actresses, and soon followed other merchants, confectioners, butchers, kebab sellers, and vegetable vendors. The vegetable vendor sold produce from nearby villages and kept a small basket of fruit. The florist worked his days making garlands and ornaments, selling them door to door in the evenings. Listeners, if you are enjoying the story, like the video and subscribe for more timeless masterpieces that you won't want to miss. One day, a courtesan's father and brother, both skilled tailors, set up a sewing machine in one of the empty shops. Soon after, a barber arrived with a dyer who displayed colorful dupattas outside his shop. their bright hues fluttering in the wind. Not long after, a struggling peddler from the city, unable to cover his rent, moved to the district. Welcomed by the courtesans, his goods, powders, soaps, combs, buttons, threads, oils, handkerchiefs, and dentifrices, began selling quickly. Thanks to the courtesan's patronage, other struggling traders followed, cloth merchants, grocers, shoemakers, and bakers, seeking refuge from slow city business or rising rents. An elderly apothecary, weary of the crowded city and oversaturated with pharmacies, moved to the district with his apprentices. He arranged his shelves with medicines, syrups, preserves, and herbal remedies, filling the walls with handwritten advertisements for his special treatments. Every morning, courtesans' attendants would collect cooling syrups and elixirs adorned with edible silver. The remaining shops were filled with the courtesans' male relatives and musicians, who spent their days playing chess, massaging their bodies with oil, raising quails, and singing while drumming on earthen pots. One musician's brother, a skilled instrument maker, took over an empty shop and filled it with old sarangis, sitars, and tamburas in need of repair. Each evening, he would play his sitar, drawing nearby shopkeepers who paused their work to listen. The sitar maestro also had a disciple, a railway clerk who would rush to the district after work to practice. Thanks to this musician, the district remained full of music. The mullah, once commuting from the village during the district's construction, decided to stay permanently, with food and support flowing in. Even the courtesan's children began attending his lessons, increasing his income. A struggling theatrical company, unable to afford city rents, set up a tented stage at a distance from the courtesans' homes. Though their performances lacked skill and their costumes were worn, the company thrived due to low ticket prices and eager audiences. Gradually, the district became famous, attracting rickshaws and horse-drawn carriages with the call, "Come, let's go to the new town." The settlement's population had grown significantly, but electricity was still unavailable. To address this, the residents sent a request to the government, which was approved after a few days. Along with that, a post office was established. A man named Baid Mia set up a small desk outside with envelopes, cards, pens, and ink to help the locals write their letters. One day, a fight broke out between two groups of drinkers over the use of soda bottles, knives, and bricks, resulting in several injuries. This prompted the government to recognize the need for a police station in the area. A theatrical company performed in the settlement for 2 months and made a decent profit. The owner of a cinema in the city thought of opening one in this district. Without delay, he bought a plot of land and began construction. A few months later, the cinema hall was completed. Inside, a small garden was made where people could relax before the show. The garden quickly became a popular spot, attracting water carriers with brass pitchers to quench the visitors' thirst. Oil massagers also arrived, offering refreshing massages to those with headaches, calling out their services. The cinema owner then built houses and shops nearby. One house became a hotel for overnight stays, and shops were rented out to a soda water factory owner, a photographer, a bicycle repairman, a laundryman, 2 bakers, a shoemaker, and a doctor with a clinic. Later, a barber shop opened, and a clockmaker set up his stall outside the photographer's shop, constantly tinkering with clocks and glasses. Attention was now turned to improving the settlement's infrastructure. Government workers arrived with tools, measuring instruments, and red flags to survey the area. Soon, construction began on roads and alleys, and a machine was brought in to pave the dirt paths. 20 years have passed since this event. This settlement has now become a bustling city with its own railway station, town hall, courthouse, and jail. The population is around 250,000. The city has a college, 2 high schools, one for boys and one for girls, and 8 primary schools where free education is provided by the municipality. There are 6 cinemas and 4 banks, 2 of which are branches of the world's largest banks. 2 daily, 3 weekly, and 10 monthly magazines and journals are published in the city. Among them, 4 are literary, 2 are moral, social, and religious. 1 is industrial, 1 is medical. 1 is for women, and 1 is for children. The city has 20 mosques, 15 temples, dharamshalas, 6 orphanages, 5 old age homes, and 3 large government hospitals, one of which is exclusively for women. In the beginning, for many years, the city was referred to as Husnabad after its residents, but later this name was deemed inappropriate and slightly altered. Instead of Husnabad, it became Hasnabad, but this name didn't last as people didn't distinguish between Husn, beauty, and Hassan, goodness. Eventually, after extensive research into ancient books and old manuscripts, the original name of the settlement was discovered, which it was called before it was abandoned hundreds of years ago, Anandi. Although the entire city is bustling, clean, and beautiful, the most attractive and lively place, the commercial center, is the market where the courtesans live. The municipal meeting in Anandi is in full swing, the hall is packed, and unusually, no member is absent. The issue under discussion by the municipality is whether to expel the courtesans from the city, as their presence is seen as an ugly stain on humanity, decency, and civilization. An eloquent speaker is giving a speech. We do not know what was the reason that allowed this impure class to live in the very heart of our ancient and historic city. This time, the area selected for these women was 12 miles away from the city,